Hello, welcome to our online discussion of euthanasia, assisted suicide, and other ending-of-life practices that have a disproportionate effect on people with disabilities for June 27th, 2014. My name is Amy Hasbrook, and I'm the director of Toujours Vivant-Not Dead Yet. We are a pan-Canadian organization, a project of the Council of Canadians with Disabilities, to unify, inform, and give voice to the disability opposition to assisted suicide and other ending-of-life practices that have a disproportionately and discriminatory effect on people with disabilities. Our position on the issue is a little different from the majority, the one portrayed in the media, but of the sort of right-wing religious opposition to assisted suicide. The main points of our opposition have to do with the fact that euthanasia and assisted suicide are unnecessary because everyone already has the option either to commit suicide, as is already permitted, and also to refuse or have treatment withdrawn, and to have palliative care and palliative sedation until the time that whatever illness is causing the reason to want to die ends up killing you. Second of all, we believe that these practices are discriminatory because our society's policy of suicide prevention is not applied in the same way on people with disabilities. So, for example, if you have a woman who is whose family dies in a car crash, and another person who is the same age but is diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, both of these people are experiencing a huge loss. But whereas the woman whose family dies in a car crash, if she expresses a desire to die, she'll be given suicide prevention services and discouraged from killing herself, whereas the person with the MS diagnosis may be encouraged to kill herself, and under such laws she will be allowed and helped to do so. And we believe that's discriminatory. Thirdly, we believe that the idea that's often talked about in these laws is that people need to have a clear and informed choice. But because people with disabilities don't have the supports and rights that other people do to choose where and how they live, that the idea of a clear and informed choice is really an illusion. If people with disabilities were truly equal in our society, first of all, nobody would be talking about helping that group commit suicide, but secondly, they would be able to choose where and how they live, and so probably wouldn't want to be asking for assisted suicide. And finally, we believe that the safeguards that are, supposedly built into these laws are ineffective, and there's plenty of evidence that in other jurisdictions that lots of people are killed who shouldn't be dying under these laws. And it's because people with disabilities are the folks who are eligible for these for assisted suicide and euthanasia. It's people with disabilities who are being killed. The goal of our online discussions is to give folks with disabilities a venue to talk about these issues, a place and a forum. And we understand that the media portrays this as an issue between liberals on the one hand and conservatives on the other, and the voice of people with disabilities is left out, whereas in fact our perspective is more liberal than the liberals, in the sense that we look at this as a human rights and a social justice issue, and the social justice is that people with disabilities are not given their social justice. The other perspective doesn't acknowledge the discrimination that we deal with, and that has to be acknowledged in looking at this issue. And the purpose of the Hangout then is to give people a chance to talk about these things and to inform and to engage with each other and to learn about the issues. Um, there are different ways to participate. You can join the Google Hangout on Air by going to Google and Hangouts on Air and just looking for the Hangout that's happening. You can also go to our website, which is tvndy.ca, and click on the Events tab, and then on the calendar, just select today's date, and you'll be able to find the English Hangout. You can go to YouTube and search for our Hangout, or you can, yeah, I guess those are the ways to do it. If you go to the Hangouts on Air, you can participate on the video directly so that we can speak directly, or if you're on either the website or on YouTube, you can submit questions and I'll be able to read them and respond to them. So there are ways to participate if you're too shy to come on the video, or if you want to speak directly, if that's easier than typing questions. Okay, our topics, for more information about the subjects that we talk about today, you can contact us in lots of ways. You can either go to our website at tvndy.ca. You can reach us via our Facebook page, which is facebook.com/toujours vivant, not dead yet. You can find us on Twitter, which is @TVNDY, or you can email me directly at tigrlily61@gmail.com. Okay, today's topics. We are going to finish off the frequently asked questions series with number 13. And that kind of works out well because today is our last online discussion before the summer break. We're breaking until August 15th, so that works out well. We also have a bunch of news briefs because it's summer doesn't mean stuff stops happening. For example, New Jersey had an assisted dying bill in New Jersey was stalled at the end of its legislative session. A French doctor was acquitted of euthanasia. The Supreme Court in Britain handed down a decision in the Nicholson case, and an assisted dying bill has been introduced in Australia. We have a few announcements, and I want to offer a little commentary on the issue of taking vacations. Very important. Frequently asked questions, part 13. As I've talked about before, we in 2012, when we had our referendum campaign in Massachusetts, we heard a lot of the same questions again and had, wanted to share the best responses that we had for those questions, and so we developed this document, which is still very useful, and it is on our website at tvndy.ca, both in English and in French, and we've been going over it during our online discussions for the past few months, since January, and doing little bits at a time, so now we are on the last few questions. And one of the questions is, we already allow the withdrawal and withholding of treatment, and the informed consent process used for that system seems to work okay. Isn't that enough for assisted suicide? And the answer to that question is, in fact, that it doesn't really work that well, and there are a lot of problems with it, such as, first of all, if we talk about there are a couple of issues. One is withholding withdrawal of treatment, and then there's also the use of do not resuscitate orders, which is similar. So in using do not resuscitate orders, also known as no code or code 0 orders, this often leads to problems, and some of the problems that have been shown in studies on the use of do not resuscitate orders, which I have some of them, and I believe some of them are on the website, and if they're not, you can ask me directly for them. Medical staff often withhold other treatments besides CPR, and a do not resuscitate DNR specifically is supposed to relate to providing CPR if the person's heart and breathing stops. But oftentimes in hospitals, it's not just CPR that's withheld, other treatments as well, like kidney dialysis, medications, even something as simple as antibiotics, medical tests, food and water, and blood transfusions may be withheld. Also, if somebody has fluid or an accumulation in their lungs or lower trachea, the staff won't provide suctioning so that the person can breathe well. So those are some of the services that they stop providing. They're not supposed to not provide those services, but the staff end up doing that, and that's a problem. People with disabilities are often pressured to sign DNRs, and the orders are just put on the person's chart without their knowledge or consent, or that of their families. That's especially common for people with cognitive, intellectual disabilities, or people with mental illness. When there's a question, somebody comes in and it's just sort of automatically put on their chart. Also elders, that happens a lot. The assumption is the person doesn't want to live, and again, if that DNR is on your chart, chances are you won't get very good care in the hospital. Even basic things might be denied. Doctors sometimes, this relates both to DNRs and to withholding and withdrawing treatment, and give unclear and incorrect information about the medical conditions, the medical outcomes of signing or not signing a DNR. And there's sort of two ways that happens. One is that they talk about what will or won't happen if you choose this service or that service. And also they'll evaluate your condition and say, you're not going to recover. That may be a mistake. And also they may give you unclear information. So for example, I have a friend who uses a wheelchair, and he was in the hospital for pneumonia, and a doctor came to him late at night and tried to get him to accept euthanasia. And the doctor was saying all kinds of things about how terrible his life would be, and he'd never be able to get out of bed again, and he'd be bankrupt, and this and that. And, my friend was very ill, and obviously it's hard to hear that when you're very ill, and fortunately my friend didn't give in to the doctor's suggestions to accept euthanasia, but in the end it was very difficult for him to listen to that. And my friend was able to recover and went back to work eventually. He was a hard recovery, but what the doctor said wasn't accurate, either about his condition or about his prognosis. But if my friend had accepted euthanasia based on the doctor's assessment, he would be dead now, but instead he's teaching at the university. And that's the kind of problem that can come up, because doctors have a low evaluation both of the quality of life and the capacity and the abilities of people with disabilities. So they're going to give bad information. So getting back to the question of refusing or having treatment withdrawn, when a person asks that treatment be withheld or withdrawn, hospital protocols do not call for suicide prevention services, even though withholding treatment could lead to death. So generally, if somebody expresses a desire to die, that person should get suicide prevention treatment. But I've read a bunch of such protocols from different hospitals, although it can be pretty hard to find those protocols. I've read those protocols, and they don't call for suicide prevention for the person who's asking that treatment be withheld or withdrawn. So that's a discrimination already. Okay. Doctors often wait too long to talk about end-of-life decisions with the person or the family. So when these conversations do happen, the patient may be unconscious or otherwise unable to participate. So that means that it's the doctor and the family making the decision together, with the person not being able to be involved. And when the doctor and the family are judging the person's abilities or desires, they may have a biased judgment. I'm just going to see who is asking questions here. This person is asking, no, he's asking an inappropriate question. So we aren't answering that question. That has nothing to do with what we're talking about here. Oops. Okay. Oops. I just lost my place. Okay, so okay. Studies show that doctors sometimes make such decisions without the permission of people or their families. So that's either to withhold or withdraw treatment, or to put a DNR on somebody's chart. And this is a situation we'll talk about in a few minutes when we talk about the doctor in France who was acquitted of euthanizing people. Finally, the problems with informed consent that arise in assisted suicide are the same for withholding and withdrawal of treatment. So one thing we talk about as to whether a person is making a clear and informed decision is whether they have the supports they need to live independently in the community, to really have access to public transportation, to have be able to get in and out of their house. Those are ideas that are not dealt with when people are making their decisions. Doctors don't inform people about what options are available. They don't help people get the services they need at home. And so those problems exist also in terms of informed consent in making decisions about withdrawing treatment. Okay, is there anything else? Okay, yeah. Okay, next question was, doesn't prohibiting assisted suicide discriminate against people with disabilities who cannot commit suicide on their own? In a word, no. Removing the criminal penalty from suicide did not make suicide into a program sponsored by the government. That's an important thing to say, which is when we talk about anti-discrimination laws, we talk about there has to be somebody who's doing the discriminating. Otherwise, there's no way to have a remedy. And so if you think of the government as being the Parliament removed the prohibition on committing suicide back in 1972. But that doesn't mean that the government created a right to suicide and set up a program to, enable people to commit suicide. That isn't a right that the government set up. And in fact, the government has a program to prevent suicide. And that's the program that everybody should have equal access to. But in fact, we don't have equal access because people with disabilities aren't being given those services in the same with the same enthusiasm as non-disabled people. So not only are there's no program to enable suicide that that disabled people are discriminated against, and the program to prevent suicide we need to have complete access to. The laws that prohibit, okay. Let's see. Applying the law against suicide equally to all people is an effort to recognize and address the devaluation of people with disabilities. So we've talked about how people are devalued in our society, and people with disabilities, I should say. And so that is why it's so important that suicide prevention programs be applied forcefully toward people with disabilities, and why it's that important that they be applied equally to redress the devaluation and discrimination that folks with disabilities experience. And the suicide prevention policy is also there to protect many people who are vulnerable, such as First Nations people, lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people, adolescents, veterans, and people with disabilities. All of these groups are vulnerable to suicidal feelings because of discrimination, isolation, bullying, violence, devaluation by society, institutionalization, identity issues, cultural and language deprivation, substance abuse, and many other social factors. So it's nothing about the people themselves that makes them more susceptible to suicide. It's about the discrimination and the problems they experience, which are caused by social discrimination. So it's not, so it's important that we recognize that the things that people with disabilities complain about when they ask for suicide are product of social neglect, and not just the fact that they have a disability. Okay, the next question is, aren't you implying that people with disabilities are weak-minded and don't know what they want if they are not allowed to have assisted suicide and make the decision for assisted suicide? And my response would be no. That's not what we're implying. We are implying that it's not that people are incapable of making choices, it's that people don't have choices. They're not given choices to make. The only choice that they have is, it's like putting somebody in a house, blocking all of the exits except for the one that opens off a huge cliff in the back, and then setting fire to the house. You can't get out except for the one exit that, you know, makes you fall down a cliff and die. It's kind of no exit. You don't have a choice. We are saying that everyone who says they want to kill themselves for whatever reason should get the same suicide prevention services and supports to live and die with full equality, autonomy, and while fully integrated in their communities. That's what we're saying. So it's a different issue. Okay, sorry, that wasn't clear. Prohibiting assisted suicide forces people to die earlier than they want because they commit suicide before they are unable to. Doesn't that deprive them of their charter rights to part of their life? And this is the argument that's used by the lawyer for the plaintiffs in the Carter case, and he is a guy who uses a wheelchair, and he essentially says that you know, if somebody has to kill themselves while they still can, they're going to lose a few months of their lives that would be valuable to them. And I guess we have a couple of responses to that. One is that if and when a person chooses to commit a suicide, that's their choice, but the loss of a few months for a few people has to be weighed against the potential loss for many more lives of people who do not want to die because mistakes and abuse that are likely, very likely, if the law is changed. And again, this is one of those situations where, you know, there are some studies that say, oh, there's no problem at all, but people who, you know, look at those studies and say there's no problem at all, those studies are only counting the reports that are submitted according to the law and aren't looking at what's actually happening in the hospitals. So if, you know, they don't look deeper than the surface, you're not going to find any problems. By saying that disabled people are eligible to be killed while others are not, the government is putting its stamp of approval on the kind of mistakes and abuse that already happen now. So that again is the issue of the state taking action and making a declaration about the value of lives of people with disabilities in this case. So I think the important message to take away from this is that if somebody dies a few months earlier than they might otherwise because they have to commit suicide before they would otherwise, before they lose the ability, meaning that they don't choose to accept just the idea of refusing treatment and having palliative sedation until they die, that's not an acceptable option for them, then that person will lose a few months of life. That is true. We're not saying it's not. But what we are saying is that many more people will lose their lives that don't want to die because of these laws, if you pass these laws. And that is a greater loss, in our opinion. If you're talking about cost-benefit analysis, which is a legal thing that lawyers like to do, then yeah, that's a choice. Okay, that is the end of our frequently asked questions file. So there you go. Let's see. Our news briefs, we have a few. First is that a bill that would allow assisted suicide in New Jersey was stalled this week. The New Jersey Assembly adjourned for the summer vacation before voting because the bill's sponsor said he didn't have the votes to pass the bill. He said the Assembly had to, quote, respect the emotions of disabled people about the bill. So essentially he was saying he didn't believe that there would be any problems. And so disabled people were being emotional when they said there will be problems. So it was really backhanded slap and not very nice. He's going to keep working on it when the Assembly comes back in the fall. But right now he doesn't have the votes. Next news item is that a French emergency doctor was acquitted on 7 counts of euthanasia that happened in 2010 and 2011. A jury found that Dr. Nicolas Bonmaison, who administered a poison to 7 patients without consulting their doctors or their families, had nevertheless not violated the law. And as a recovering lawyer, I can tell you that sometimes juries find really weird stuff, make really weird decisions. And you might not even know where that idea came from, but that's the decision they made, and that's what you have to live with. And so, unfortunately, that's what this jury decided. That he did those things, or that he didn't. I'm not even sure because it's hard to get a clear account from the media, but that it didn't violate the law. At the same time, a European court ordered that the feeding tube be restored for Vincent Lambert while it considers his case. Lambert is in a state of diminished consciousness. Again, it's impossible to know from the news accounts exactly what the situation is because they throw words around so loosely they have no idea what they're talking about. So some say vegetative, some say minimally conscious, some say this, some say that. They don't, it's hard to know. So his wife, let's see, his parents and his sister want for him to receive feeding, tube feeding. And his wife and his brothers want the feeding to be stopped. So they're in a big fight about this, and this has been going on for a long time. He's seen different sets of experts, but I haven't read deeply enough into the particular case to know exactly what's happened, but perhaps I will be able to do that this summer while I am on a short break, or at least a different kind of work schedule. The British Supreme Court handed down a decision in the Nicklinson case last week. As you may remember, Tony Nicklinson was a guy who had very limited movement and wanted to die, and sued for the ability for his wife to kill him, and that he ended up dying before it made it all the way to the Supreme Court. The court rejected the appeal of Nicklinson and another guy, Lamb, who joined the appeal, and stated that it was up to Parliament to make laws on the question of assisted dying. The court also said that England had the right to pass its own laws on the subject under the margin of appreciation idea, which is a legal principle established by the European Court to allow EU member countries to have some flexibility in self-governance. So essentially, the court just handed it off to the Parliament. And in the meanwhile, there's already an assisted dying bill before the English Parliament, sponsored by Lord Falconer, and that will be heard on July 18th for its second reading. There's been no vote in principle on it, but the thing to remember is that this bill is being heard in the context, or at the same time, as this ongoing cuts in services and benefits to people with disabilities. So these are both services. The Independent Living Fund is going to be cut, that enables people to live in the community and to govern the way their services are given, and also the revenues. People are having to go through this process of evaluating if they're capable of working, and a lot of people are being found capable of work end up dying within the next couple of weeks because they're so sick. And also, people who are found capable to work are losing benefits and therefore getting sicker and therefore can't work, but then there's no reassessment. And basically, since this program started, there have been thousands of deaths and suicides of people who were evaluated capable of work, who either couldn't work or just who couldn't work and were so stressed they killed themselves, or who died shortly after their evaluation of being able to work. And finally, in our news briefs, an assisted dying bill has been introduced in the Parliament in Australia. And this is despite the fact that I believe it was the Northern Territories in Australia had a euthanasia law in 1996 and 97, which was repealed because it was passed without the consent and participation of the Aboriginal people there, who are totally opposed. And since they're the majority population in that territory, it was really a bad thing to do that. So they had to repeal that law, and yet they're trying again in Australia to have assisted suicide. And it's a fairly similar economic and political situation there. A lot of people with disabilities are losing, having revenue and services cuts, and there's a very negative publicity campaign about people with disabilities in England and in Australia, and that is going to start here. Just you wait. Okay, finally, I have a few announcements, which is, first, TVNDY and the Euthanasia Prevention Coalition are sponsoring a parliamentary lunch on October 2nd to inform the members of Parliament about the disability opposition to euthanasia and assisted suicide. For more information about that, please see our website or our Facebook page, and you can contact me directly, and I'll give you my email address again in a few minutes. TVNDY is still looking for stories. If you've been encouraged to accept euthanasia or to sign a do not resuscitate order, or had one put on your chart without your consent, or even just had poor medical care because of your disability, your story could help us stop assisted suicide from becoming law in Quebec and Canada. So please email the details or just let me know and we'll come and make a video, and it can be done anonymously. You don't have to show your face. We can disguise your voice. But it's very important that we get people's stories because we need to show that it's not just we're afraid of things that might happen, that things are already happening that are a danger to people with disabilities. Okay, and as I said before, I'm taking a summer break. I'll be back on August 15th, which is a Friday, obviously, and news doesn't stop, and I will still be working, but just this part of the work, we won't have the online discussions every week. So keep in touch with our Facebook page and our Twitter feed to be in touch regularly with what's happening. And we'll be back on the 15th of August. And finally, you will find soon a report of our activities for 2013 will be on our website. So you can look that up within the next week or so. Finally, I wanted to offer a short commentary about why I'm taking a vacation. I shouldn't have to, but in the United States, people don't take long vacations, and in Canada, they do. A lot of things shut down for the summer. And I haven't taken a long break, and I don't intend to take a really long break, but I do need to have some time. This work is very, very hard for people with disabilities to do because every story, every article you read touches you personally. For non-disabled people, it's a lot more removed. It's somebody else, but when you have a disability, it's you they're talking about when they talk about euthanizing kids, because disabled kids, because they're useless and they don't contribute anything to society. Because you have a disability, you're that kind of person. At least you are in solidarity with those kind of people. It's like being a Jew and talking about Holocaust stuff all the time. It's very, very difficult. And a long time ago, 30 years ago, I made a commitment to do this work for the rest of my life, and I knew that in order to do that, I need to pace myself. So rather than run the race of the rabbit, I run the race of the tortoise. I go slow. I try to take it easy, and so I need to take a little time to take care of myself and not burn out. So that's why I'm taking a break. But as I said, I'm not leaving the, I will still be working. I just won't be doing the online discussions for a few weeks. But we will be back on the 15th of August with probably a ton of information because this stuff doesn't stop during the summer. It keeps going. And a lot will be happening. So keep your eye on the webpage, on the Facebook page, and on our Twitter feed. So in order to contact us, on that Twitter feed is @TVNDY. The Facebook page is facebook.com/toujours vivant, not dead yet. And the website is tvndy.ca. To contact me directly, you can email me at tigrlily61@gmail.com. Thank you very much for watching, and I look forward to being with you again on the 15th of August. Goodbye.